Greetings all, Ferrari601 here. Making good on their promise, this week ASR have released this, version 1.0 of the 2004 Ferrari F2004 for Assetto Corsa. The guys over at ASR have had this car in gestation for the better part of the last year and a half. The F2004, in closed betas available to anybody for a nominal donation sum, has been released in various guises over that time. However, as promised, ASR have finally given us the final version, version 1.0, for free of the Ferrari F2004. This car is one that needs absolutely no introduction. If you are a Formula One fan, you know what this car is. This is the machine that gave Michael Schumacher his 7th and final Drivers' World Championship, firmly cementing his reputation and his legacy of being, technically speaking, when we talk about wins and we talk about championships, the most successful Grand Prix driver of all time. This also is one of the most successful Formula One cars of all time, given its history and racing pedigree. The F2004, as I said, it is an absolute legend. There is no storyline, no superlative, nothing at all that I can render to all of you that would be sufficient to fully explain this car's significance and this car's provenance. However, now, all of us, for free, have the opportunity to experience this car for ourselves in Assetto Corsa. The F2004, as I mentioned, it has a storied race provenance. Its performances over the really 2 seasons in which it was competing in Formula One, at least partially, is pretty spectacular. There are few racing cars ever produced that have the pedigree of the Ferrari F2004. Most of the other ones that can even compete or even somewhat surpass the F2004 are also other Ferrari Formula One cars. So we are talking about a very exclusive club in terms of its racing pedigree. Over the course of the 20 races in which it was entered over the 2004 and the first 2 races of the 2005 World Championship, the Ferrari F2004 won 15 of them. It scored 30 podium positions. Remember, Ferrari entered 2 cars in each race. Scored 12 pole positions and holds 14 fastest laps for the 2004 and 2005 seasons. The Ferrari F2004 was so good, it was so fast, and we'll get into why it was so good and so fast a little bit later on. However, it still holds some current Formula One lap records, all the way up now to today in 2017. The Ferrari F2004 still holds a number of lap records, including at circuits where Formula One still races to this day. That's how quick this car was. That's why, one of the reasons anyway, why it is so incredibly legendary and so wonderfully admired by so many tifosi all around the world. Getting into the technical specifications on the F2004, it was designed by the legendary Ferrari brain trust of the era, Ross Brawn as technical director and Rory Byrne as the chief designer. Rory Byrne recently starting to reunite himself with Ferrari in the design department. The SF70H, Ferrari's 2017 Formula One car, definitely bears a lot of Rory Byrne traits, and it's probably no secret and no surprise then that Ferrari have returned firmly to the front of the field in Formula One in 2017 with that Rory Byrne brain trust on hand. Additionally, the F2004, technically speaking, the chassis is, of course, as you would expect from a mid-2000s Formula One car. It's a molded carbon fiber and honeycomb composite structure. Lots and lots of carbon fiber going into the construction of this car. Essentially everything other than the engine and gearbox and exhaust and wheels, things like that. Essentially everything else on the car is some flavor of carbon fiber. Connecting the car to the road, the suspension system, we have independent suspension, of course, on all 4 corners as you would be expecting. Push rod activated torsion springs on all 4 corners, front and rear. Formula One design trends of the era, push rod was the way to go. In the late 80s and early 90s, teams started to experiment with pull rod suspensions, both on the front and rear. In the early 90s, these arrangements were seen mostly on the rear. However, by the time the mid to late 90s roll around, and certainly this carried over into the mid 2000s, as we can see, push rod was deemed the way to go. Later on, at the end of the 2000s, beginning in the 2010s, basically, starting in the 2010 season, teams started to experiment again with that pull rod layout. Ferrari, in particular, had a whole sequence of pull rod only Formula One cars, and the performance really wasn't there. However, teams have resurrected the idea of using pull rod on the rear suspension, unlike what we see here on the F2004. And all of the 2017 Formula One cars right now using that pull rod rear suspension. However, back in 2004, push rod was certainly the way to go. Other specifications on the F2004, the length is 4,545 millimeters or 179 inches for those of you who are so inclined. Width is 1,796 millimeters or 71 inches. The height is 959 millimeters or 38 inches. So that just gives you the sense of the proportions of this car. These Formula One cars, for those of you who have never been fortunate enough to see one in the flesh in real life, particularly to get up close and to stand next to it and touch it and things like that, these Formula One cars are tiny. They really are tiny. It's difficult to get a sense of scale when you see them on television, but trust me, I've stood next to a Ferrari F2002, and one of the first things that struck me about it was how small these things really are. It certainly lends itself to being very agile, as we all know Formula One cars are. In the back of the Ferrari F2004, providing power for us is the Ferrari Type 053 3-liter V10 engine. 3,000 cc's displacement, 183 cubic inches for those of you who like old money. 10 cylinders, obviously, at a 90-degree bank angle, 2 banks of 5 cylinders each, making that V10 engine. It's naturally aspirated, of course. It's mid-mounted right behind the fuel tank, behind the cockpit, and of course, it provides its power through a 7-speed semi-automatic plus reverse paddle shift gearbox via rear drive layout. So, rear wheels are driven on this thing, as of course you all know. No four-wheel drive systems in Formula One. That gearbox, as I mentioned, it's a semi-automatic sequential setup with a limited slip differential, 7-speed unit, as was pretty much ubiquitous in this era of Formula One. I believe only 2 teams were still running 6-speed gearboxes in 2004. They would be Minardi and Renault, still the holdouts for the 6-speed units. Williams, trying to remember if Williams ran a 6-speed unit all the way up into 2005. They might have. Which would mean they ran a 6-speed unit in 2004 as well. Renault also ran a 6-speed unit in 2005, as did Minardi, but most of the teams by 2004 had migrated to the 7-speed units. That gearbox, however, it had to have a lot of gears and it had to have a lot of reliability because the amount of power it was producing and transmitting to the rear wheels was absolutely enormous. The power output on this car, we still can't get 100% nailed down figures simply because of the nature of the beast, because this car was so top secret when it was racing, but anywhere between 880 and 950 horsepower coming out of that 3-liter V10 engine, that Type 053 unit from Ferrari. 950 horsepower in a car that weighs only 605 kilograms or 1,334 pounds in old money. That is the level of performance that you've got in this car. That is why it still, to this day, holds so many lap records. Of course, you've got to get all that performance under control on occasion, and therefore you need some brakes. Big brakes on this car. They are all carbon disc brakes. They're provided by Brembo, as you might expect, being Ferrari's exclusive supplier in the era. Big carbon ceramic rotors and pads on this car. They can get this thing stopped in literally the blink of an eye. If you're doing 60 miles an hour in this car and you slam on the brakes, you'll be stopped before you can count to 1. That's the braking performance in this car. Of course, the tires are Bridgestone. They were bespoke to the car in this era. Remember, in 2004, there was a tire war going on in Formula One between Bridgestone and Michelin. Ferrari had been longtime partners with Bridgestone, and Bridgestone developed bespoke tires just for the Ferrari F2004, as they did for any other teams that they supplied in the era. They ride on BBS racing wheels with a 13-inch diameter. Absolutely awesome package in this Ferrari F2004, and of course it won the Drivers' Championship for Michael Schumacher, his 7th and final Drivers' Championship, and it also took home the Constructors' Championship for Ferrari in 2004 as well. I mentioned earlier that the F2004 lived into 2005 as well. It did. It competed in the first 2 rounds of the 2005 season in Australia and Malaysia under the guise of the F2004M. The Ferrari F2005 was not quite ready for the first race in Australia. Therefore, the F2004 was called back into service for those first 2 rounds in 2005. Its best finish was 2nd place in Australia, courtesy of Rubens Barrichello, and Michael Schumacher had a retirement in Australia. However, he recovered to finish 7th in Malaysia, Rubens Barrichello retiring from that race. The F2004 last saw action in the 2005 Malaysian Grand Prix as the Ferrari F2005 made its debut at the 2005 Bahrain Grand Prix. 2005 was not the best year for Ferrari. They were hampered big time by those tire change regulations, meaning that you could not change tires during the Grand Prix. A single set of tires had to get a car through qualifying and the entire Grand Prix distance in that era. The F2004, being part of a generation of cars that really goes back to the F2002, was not designed with that in mind. It was designed with the mindset that basically a Grand Prix could be a series of 2 or maybe even 3 shorter sprints with the pit stop strategies, taking on fuel and tires at each pit stop. Without having the luxury of changing tires, the F2004 and the F2005 later on really fell victim to that, and of course Ferrari were eclipsed entirely by Renault and McLaren in 2005 for that fight for the Constructors and Drivers' World Championships. However, be that as it may, in its era, the Ferrari F2004 was an absolutely unbeatable package, and of course the 15 race wins it took out of the 20 races contested, absolutely a testament to that. However, what have we got here in terms of what ASR have brought us in version 1.0 here in Assetto Corsa? Those of you who have seen my channel before, you've seen my videos before, you know that I absolutely love this car to death, and it has featured in literally scores of my videos over the last year and a half since it has been available in closed beta. However, here in 1.0, we have truly a very refined package. First of all, just the initial things that strike your eye when you look at this car, you see the fit and finish of everything. This car has always looked good in every previous iteration. It's always driven well, and it's always looked the part as well. But this 1.0 version, you can see just how the light is shimmering across the snorkel and cockpit surround there as the car just starts to face exactly head on to us. Absolutely wonderful. It glints as if it were made of diamond. Thankfully, though, it's not made of diamond because that would be very heavy. But just the amount of care and attention to detail that ASR have taken in developing this car and really honing this model, it really shows right here in showroom view. I absolutely love it. Not only do you see great reflections of the light, but you also see great optical reflections in that paint. You can see some reflections of the showroom as the car continues to spin around. You see how the shadows fall across the car. Absolutely wonderful. Everything looks entirely crisp and clean. The relative sizes and scaling of everything looks accurate. Everything on this is just 100% laser perfect. I absolutely love it. I can't get enough of just looking at this car at a standstill, let alone driving it, which of course we're going to do a little bit later on. Having a look here at the left side of the car as we continue to rotate, we can zoom in. Have a look at those wheels. I love the geometries in those wheels. You can see that spoked design, and then of course great depth of the wheel nut there. The red wheel nuts on this side, and there are blue ones on the right side of the car, just so the mechanics can tell the direction of the wheel nut threads. They're threaded in opposite directions on either side of the car, but also you can get in there behind the wheels and you can see the brake discs and the Brembo calipers in there. Absolutely wonderful attention to detail, guys. Absolutely love it so very, very much. Looking around the midsection of the car, you can see that barge board treatment that Ferrari were using in this era. A little bit difficult to see the leading edge of those barge boards with the contrast against the white and brightly lit floor, but you can see the serrated edge there on the leading edge of the main barge boards just below the Ferrari Scudetto logo there, and you can see just the geometries with that little vein just conditioning the airflow so it can go into the side pod and the radiator duct there. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful job. An interesting thing to note here about the design of the floor on these 2004 era Formula 1 cars, you can see the leading edge of the floor just rears of the barge board. You can see everything is pretty much flush to the side of the side pod. Nowadays, we see the team starting to play a lot more in this area for aerodynamic gains, but that was not so much the case in 2004. You had more engine power, so aerodynamics, yes, they were very important, but Still, the teams basically were still looking for ways to cut drag, and the more appendages you have sticking out of the car, that's more drag, and that hurts your straight line performance. So even if perhaps your downforce gains aren't what they theoretically could be, you've got the engine power. So even if you're a little slower on the corners, you're going to make up that time, and then plenty more once you get on the power once again with 980 horses under the bonnet. Looking around further down the left side of the car, you can see that sun glint over the side pod there. That's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely love that. You can see the details. You can see the screw heads, the bolt heads here holding on the different elements of the bodywork. These panels which would be removable for running in hot climates like Bahrain, for example. Absolutely wonderful. This car won the first ever Bahrain Grand Prix in the hands of Michael Schumacher in 2004. Surely a lot of these blanking panels would have been removed for that race because, after all, that's in the middle of a desert. See here, moving the rears, you can see the turning vanes and the little scoop sections on the outboard edges of the side pods, just conditioning that airflow over the rear tires. Absolutely wonderful attention to detail here. And you can also see the shut line where the floor starts to interface with the side of the bodywork. Wonderfully rendered indeed. Moving around the rear of the car, you can see the textures on the rear tire. Love all that. And then the rear wing end plate. You can see very simple geometries relative to what we're seeing today. Essentially just a straight flat end plate there, and then a little bit of a protrusion and turn inboard on the very bottom and trailing edge of that end plate. To the rear end section proper, massive, massive, massive diffuser on this thing. You can see how this car is generating its downforce. Lots of underbody aero and also a lot of topside aero with this massive rear wing as well. You can see this beam wing across the bottom, contoured slightly to accommodate the rain light, which is operable, by the way, in the pit lane. But wonderful attention to detail. Looking closer in on the rear suspension, you can see the wishbones and, of course, the push rods going into the bodywork there. And you can also see underneath the bodywork, you can just see, maybe a little bit better on this side, yeah, a little bit. You can see that Ferrari V10. You can see the valve covers there, the Testarossa valve covers, peeking out saying, let's go play. Also, interestingly enough, very nicely modeled, the exhaust primaries coming out of the sides of the engine, going up into that single collector pipe for each bank. Wonderful stuff. Absolutely wonderful. Coming around the shadowed side of the car, a little bit better look at those reflections now. Love how dynamic those reflections are. They look absolutely perfect. Wonderful, wonderful work. Coming around this side, yeah, moving up. There's the cockpit. Yeah, like that cockpit an awful lot. Let's go in, shall we? Flying in over the side, and off we go. In the cockpit, the eye point in here is very, very high. We will not be driving the car from this high up. However, you can see, you can use this slightly higher angle to get a better vantage point of the detail here in the cockpit. See the steering wheel? Steering wheel has been facelifted slightly from the last beta version of the F2004, which was 0.6 beta. The shift lights have been reconfigured now. They have a very nice light bloom effect when they come on as you're going up through the revs and getting ready to change up through the gears. Love all that. And of course, you have a lot of information on the steering wheel itself, which we can't see right now because the car is switched off in showroom view. But once we get out on track, you'll see a whole bunch of information coming up there on that LCD. Moving to either side of the steering wheel, to the left side first, you can see a whole bunch of switches and buttons, which have mostly disappeared now from modern Formula One cars. Pretty much every function a driver will ever need to access is on the steering wheel these days. As you can see, this steering wheel has a lot of bits and bobs, switches and dials and buttons on it, but still not as many as we have today. So that's pretty mind-boggling. Still there on the left-hand side of the bulkhead, you can see a reverse button, an ignition kill, a fire bottle button as well, things of that nature, rain light, in addition to all of that. So still, this era, although these cars were very much digital, basically nothing is analog in these particular generations of cars, but still some actual dash-mounted controls. Over on the right-hand side of the cockpit, you can see that brake bias adjuster. Looks like it adjusts in 4 steps for drivers to get into quick access brake bias presets. Also, you have a brake bias dial where a driver can manually dial in some brake bias. Additionally, moving down, you can see the detail in the seat belts. You can see the weave in the fabric. I love that. And of course, everything goes into that center hub that could be released essentially instantaneously should a driver need to get out of the car in a hurry. Moving around to the side of the cockpit, you can see that seat, which looks to be padded in some Alcantara-like material. Not entirely sure how realistic that is, because that would simply cost more weight on the car, and weight is everything in a race car, so I don't know if these seats would have been padded in something like Alcantara or not. I do know on the bottom, though, not uncommon for teams to cover the bottom, the underside of the seats, in gold. Not because they want to be extravagant, but because gold is one of the best heat reflectors out there. And because the driver is sitting right in front of the fuel tank, which itself is right in front of the engine, the cockpits of these Formula One cars can get very hot on occasion, particularly if you were to have some seal failures going into the engine bay. It could get very, very hot, which would be very uncomfortable for the drivers. Moving up toward topside again, you can see the cockpit surround. Again, wonderful reflections going on there with the light. See the lens flare coming in here as we go directly into that reflected sunlight. Absolutely love it. And then moving around the back side of the headrest, and then looking up toward the air snorkel, and then the T-bar, which carries the onboard camera, which is actually rendered. A little difficult to see perhaps, but toward the extreme right side of that T-bar from our vantage point. It's actually the left side of the T-bar, but the right side from our angle, you can see the camera lens in there. I love that detail. Really shows the craftsmanship that ASR have decided to put into this car. And I don't think anything else would be fitting of the Ferrari F2004. You have to put that level of detail, that level of craftsmanship, because it demonstrates the respect for the history of Formula One that these modders have, and certainly because of the situation that we have all known about for the last couple of years that Michael Schumacher is going through. I think that any car that is going to attempt to be a rendering, a rendition of one of his championship winners, I think it truly has to be as perfect as you can make it. Such is the contribution that Michael Schumacher made to motor racing, and particularly to the history of Formula One. I think Herr Schumacher would be quite proud of the effort that ASR have put together here, and certainly I consider it a privilege for all of us now to be able to have the opportunity to get into this car and drive it for ourselves. Leaving the cockpit here, we'll just have one final look around the car as we can start to spin it up again in showroom view. Absolutely wonderful, wonderful work for ASR on this F2004. Additionally to this livery, there are also some alternate liveries for the car. Here you can see Barrichello's car, so this is number 2. Schumacher, of course, had number 1 in 2004 because he was reigning world champion and he would win the world championship again. Rubens Barrichello has the yellow T-bar and the number 2. Additionally to that, you also have the tobacco livery, so this is Barrichello's alternate tobacco livery, and of course you have Schumacher's alternate tobacco livery as well. So 100% accurate in terms of the liveries available on this car, and I've got to say hats off to ASR for the amount of detail and craftsmanship and truly pride and respect, not only for themselves but for the history of Ferrari and also to the legacy of Michael Schumacher in their work on this car. Absolutely brilliant, brilliant stuff. I cannot commend these guys highly enough. Certainly, if you're not convinced already that you should give this car a chance, go download it. There will be a link in the description. You've got to have a go in this thing. If you've not driven it yet, you are really about to be surprised with the level of performance that this car has got. However, if you're not quite ready to give it a try, you can stick around here because we are going to go to Imola in mere moments and give this car a real workout just to show you what this thing can do now that it's available to all of us in version 1.0. We'll see you at Imola in just a moment.
Welcome to Imola. Before we get out on track, of course, we're going to have a look through the setup screen and show you what's what with ASR's Ferrari F2004 here in version 1.0. Here on the gear screen, of course, this is the gearbox showing us 1st through 7th gear, plus the final drive ratio. All of these are adjustable any way you like, and you can see with the gearing that is chosen for us in the default setup, theoretically, we are going to top out at 221 miles per hour. Tires, 2 tire compounds to choose from, your Bridgestone Potenzas, the hards or the softs. Your tire pressures default to 9 psi. Here they can go all the way up to 25 psi, I believe. Yes. And go all the way down to 5 psi if you so choose. However, the default value there is 9 psi. Fuel, the default fuel level is 60 liters, however we have trimmed it out to 0 just to keep the engine quiet here in the pit lane. However, your maximum fuel capacity is 150 liters. Remember, refueling was a feature in Grand Prix races during this time, so you will have to refuel at least once to do an entire race distance. Of course, that pit stop strategy is up to you depending on where you are in the field and how fast you're going. Electronics, traction control settings here. Default value is 1, which is the most assist. You can crank it all the way back to 6, which is the least assist with the system still being active, or additionally you can turn it off entirely if you are crazy enough to do so. These cars did run with traction control. They're designed to run traction control, therefore we will be running traction control. And with 980 horsepower, 950, 980, depending on which figures you want to look at, yeah, you're going to need all the help you can get. Aero, front and rear wing. Default values shown here, 18 degrees on the front and 45 degrees on the rear. Front wing can ramp all the way down to 6 degrees if you so choose, or all the way up to 25 degrees. You do not see the flap angles change visually, however the effects are modeled in the sim. The rear wing similarly, 45 degrees is the default value, 30 degrees is the minimum, and 50 degrees is the maximum. Alignment, camber and toe on all 4 corners, default values shown here. And your dampers, these are your bound and rebound settings, fast and slow in your compression, and then your extension again on all 4 corners. Drivetrain, here's where you make your differential adjustments, power, coast, and preload. Default value shown 30 and 50% power and coast respectively, and your preload is defaulted to 30 Newton meters. Generic brake bias, brake power, 54% to the front, and your brake power, of course, at 100%. Your engine limiter, this is your rev limiter, defaults to 100%, which is its maximum value. You can crank it down to 95% if you're feeling a little timid. Your advanced suspension settings, these are your bump stop rates and your travel ranges for the suspension in their compression mode. So default value shown here on all 4 corners. And the suspension screen proper. Anti-roll bars front and rear, first of all. Wheel rates and ride heights here on your front and rear, basically. So all 4 corners, of course, represented here. Pit stop strategy, that's the screen that every car has now. You can change your pit stop strategy accordingly as the race unfolds. We're going to make our first run here on default setup, including default fuel load, so 60 liters is the default value there, and everything else will be default as well. The hard tires and the hard tire pressures will keep the gearing the same for the default setup as well. Here in the cockpit, the car has come to life. You can see everything that we've got going on the steering wheel here. You can see the display is alive, and it's showing us a lot of information. First of all, from the top, you see 4,000 right in the middle there of that LCD. That is obviously engine RPM. It idles at a very healthy 4,000 RPM. That's actually not too far away from the red line in my road car, so yeah, that puts that in perspective for you. On the upper left of the steering wheel display, you have your traction control setting. Currently, we are in mode 1. However, if we cycle through the traction control settings, you can see that number changes accordingly. If you turn it off, it displays 0. You don't want to see 0 too often in this car. To the right of that, in the upper right of the steering wheel display, the number 60, that is your fuel level in liters. Below that, of course, right in the center of the display, you've got a big gear position indicator. So right now showing neutral, but we go up and down through the box. It changes accordingly, up and down through the gears as well as into reverse. To the left of that, you have your current lap time ticking away, just going past 27 seconds at the moment. And then you're going to have on the right of that, that I believe is oil temperature. Makes sense to me. Below that, you're going to have a delta on the lower right corner of the steering wheel. Now that's going to be your last lap delta. That'll go into plus or minus territory depending on what you're doing relative to your last lap time. And then to the left of that, in the lower left, you have your current lap, so how many laps you have actually turned. In the middle, on the bottom of that display, you've got your speed. It'll be reading out in miles per hour for us. Down below the Ferrari Manettino switch in the center of the steering wheel, below that you have your current lap time as well. So showing 9:10 at the moment. And then below that, you're going to have your last lap time as well. Below the second Manettino switch, the one with the Scudetto on it, that is going to be your lap delta as well. So, with all the instrumentation sorted, let's go out on track on default setup. We'll do an install lap just to make sure everything is okay, and then we'll start talking about what it feels like on the default setup. Of course, sitting in the pit lane like we were, all the tires temperatures would have fallen away. So just going to be sensible here for the first few corners. Get some heat back into the tires and brakes. course, we are on those hard tires as well, so they'll take a little bit longer to come up to temperature. Getting some good heat in those brakes now. And now I think 950, 980 horsepower is about to be released. Hold on tight. Remember, we are on the default setup. You'll notice down the straight, I did not quite get the chance to punch up 7th gear. The gearing is a bit too long for Imola on default setup, and there's a little bit too much wing on the car. The car feels extremely stable at the moment, but it feels a little bit too stable. This is definitely a very conservative setup. See that big gap from 4th to 5th, and an even bigger gap in drive from 5th to 6th. That is an artifact of the gear ratios on this default setup. I have seen a couple of comments from some of you on my first drive video in this car that the shifting takes a little bit too long, particularly on the downshift. That's because this default setup, the gears are very widely spaced. If you do some setup work and you work on the gearbox, you get the ratios dialed into the particular track you're on, you will notice the shift times will be much faster, and that obviously will be a whole lot more representative of what this car was actually like back in the day. And that gap into 6th gear from 5th is just way too wide. Just barely an opportunity to get it into 7th there. Hard tires giving me some understeer on turn-in. This is definitely a conservative default setup from ASR. This being the first public release of this mod, I'm sure a lot of people are very excited to get their hands on it, but it would be very discouraging to have your first run and just start spinning all over the place if you're not used to this car, because there's a lot of power in here. I've been driving this car for about a year and a half. I've been following the development of this thing since pretty much the very beginning. But if you are a newcomer, as I assume many of you probably are, this thing will take a lot of getting used to. And we'll get into some of that in this video. So a conservative default setup, I can understand why ASR went in that direction. However, if you do know what you're doing, if you do have a lot of seat time in this car, this default setup just does not have it. Not at all. See what's our lap time coming into here. Oh yeah, we're going to be going a lot faster than this, guys. Don't you worry. 122.361, I believe, if I can read that correctly. Here, it's Piratella, 4th gear. Yeah, look, there's so much understeer on this default setup with the hard tires, remember. So, yes, that is to be expected for sure. But the lap times here, not particularly impressive. We're carrying a lot of fuel on board, still 47 liters, and the hard tires, of course, and a lot of wing, so the straight line speed is not quite where it could be, despite the engine power. So, yes, lap times are going to come down during this session, don't you worry. Lots of understeer there. 120.641. Sounds about right. I'll just put this into a little bit of perspective for you. My personal best at Imola was beaten in this car. I recorded the hot laps a couple of hours ago before I started to capture what you're seeing right now. And I bested my personal lap record at this place by 1.5 seconds in this car. So, yes, we are talking about 4.5 seconds faster per lap is still the pace to be found from this default setup. At least what I've been able to find so far. The brakes, everything obviously well up to temperature here. Everything wide over the curbs. In terms of the overall balance, yes, this default setup is very understeery. However, everything else feels very stable and planted and glued to the tarmac, as you would expect in a car such as this. The turn-in is ultra precise, ultra responsive. We're hampered right now by those hard tires, so the front is sliding a bit more than I would like, but the traction in the acceleration zone's unparalleled. This thing is not going to skate out from underneath you once you get back on the throttle. The brakes also very solid, very responsive. They're Formula One brakes. What would you expect? But it's actually quite difficult to lock up in this car, particularly at high speed. Those of you who know how these cars generate their grip, you'll know that the faster you go, the more downforce you have. So when you get on the binders into a heavy braking zone, you can use that full brake power in your initial braking simply because the car's being sucked down onto the road with about 2.5 times its own weight in downforce. So you're not going to lock up at high speed. As you start to bleed the speed away, though, and you're getting ready to turn in, you'd better come off of that brake pedal quite significantly because that downforce goes away as you slow down, and because the car only weighs 600 kilograms or about 1,330 pounds, you're going to lock him up really quickly. This thing has the capacity to generate about 5 G of deceleration. I think we're coming quicker on this lap. 120.267. Yep. There is still about 4 seconds to be found. I don't think we'll quite get down to the ultimate pace, at least in the commentated version or segment of this video. However, we will definitely make it into the 118s. Understeer through Tosa. Again, those hard tires, still 37 liters of fuel on board. You can see, though, just how quickly this thing will drink gasoline. We're on our 7th lap right now. We started with 60 liters. We've almost burned half of our fuel in just 7 laps. So, yes, 150 liters is the fuel capacity overall, but no, it's not going to last a Grand Prix distance. See the revs there as the green lights come on across the top of the steering wheel, telling you it's time to upshift. Those green lights come on at just about 19,000 RPM. That's a number we haven't heard in a long time. However, with us, back into the pits, because it's time to put a good setup on this car. It's time to go at least 2.5 seconds per lap faster for this run. Not sure about the ultimate pace, but you will see the ultimate pace in the hot laps at the end of the video, I do promise. So, back in the pits here, let's load up my setup. We're all loaded up. You can see I have taken a little bit of gearing out of the car, so we're going to top out at 210 miles an hour flat out in 7th instead of the 221 we had before. That's just going to aid acceleration across the board. Tires, we're running the softs now, 9 psi still. Balance felt pretty good with those pressures. Fuel, we've only got 17 liters on board right now. However, we're going to ramp that up quite a bit so we can have a longer run. Let's have at least 12 laps worth on board, so let's say, let's go back up to 60 liters. The car felt okay with that fuel load. Traction control stays where it is. Aero, we've taken off some rear wing, and we've actually added a little bit of front wing. I like the car to be pointy. I like a positive turn-in, so at the expense of a little bit of rear grip, I'm happy with where the car is in this spec. Alignment, I have not made any suspension adjustments in the alignment or dampers. Diff power, no, I haven't made any adjustments here either on power, coast, and preload. Everything actually felt very solid under acceleration. Generic, I haven't touched the brake bias, the brake power, or the engine limiter. I have not changed the advanced suspension settings either. However, here we've made a couple of changes, a little bit more rake in the car. However, the roll bars, anti-roll bars front and rear, they are not changed at all. Everything felt really, really happy. So now, back out into the pit lane, and we're going to have ourselves a faster run now. Straight onto the power now. Those soft tires are going to be helping us out a lot with the grip under acceleration as well as into the turn-in. We don't really have the temperature in them right now, though, so some caution will have to be exercised on this first outlap. Listen as I go up through the box at Tosa. You can see I've eliminated those big gaps between third and fourth and fifth. They do not need to be there. They do not help you at all when it comes to acceleration or general tractability. Still getting some brake temp. Still getting some tire temp. Seventh gear, diving down toward Rivatsa onto the brakes. Second gear, hit the apex, tickle the throttle, full throttle. Third gear, short shift, hard on the power, over the exit curbs. Now down the start-finish straight to start our first proper flying lap in this session. So over 200 miles an hour already, 205, 206, 207, 208. Remember, we're geared to 210. We hit 209. That's exactly what you want the gearing to be for Imola, at very least, with the amount of wing I'm running. First sector, we've picked up a full second on our last best already. Back end gets a little squirrely there over the crest of Minerale. Just tickling it a bit still. Remember, heavy on fuel a little bit. Curbs bound over the curbs, a little too harsh there. That's actually the first spin I've had in this car. Well, the first complete spin. Had a little bit of a spin in that shakedown video. However, that understeer I was complaining about before, it's pretty much entirely gone. Again, we'll have to complete the warm-up cycle now on these tires, which are slightly damaged due to my indolence. On the brakes. Third gear, a little wide of the apex there. Can we recover it? Yes, barely. A little twitchy on the back. I mentioned that I've gone for a pointy car to the expense of some rear grip. You're seeing the symptoms of that now. I do like a bit of oversteer. I am prepared to deal with that. No problems as far as I'm concerned. Your opinions may vary. 51 liters of fuel remaining. That was hair racing. I don't know if you noticed, back end got very, very loose to the first element of Aqua Minerale. They held on to it somehow. A bit less curve this time, slower, but okay. 19,000 RPM. Those are the good old days. 19,000 RPM out of a V10. You gotta love it. That was very squirrely. 118,776, I believe. Told you we get into the 18s, no problem. Working our way uphill all the time here through the Tosa corner. Up the back straight, one of the back straights, I guess you could call it. It's not really a straight. Fourth gear into Piratella, hit the curb on the power hard, use the exit curbs, still picking up some time. Piratella again twitchy through that first element of the corner. Back up the hill. Here's where you really appreciate how much horsepower this car's got. These long uphill runs at Imola. That's why we chose Imola. Other than the fact that it's my favorite circuit, you really appreciate engine power at a place like this because you've got so much elevation change. The land undulates so much around this racetrack. You need engine power and you need good brakes, and this car has both of those things in abundance. Lap time 118.131. There you go. Traction control working overtime there, keeping the back end in check, no problem. You do have to be careful getting back on the power below 60 miles an hour or so, below about 100 clicks for my international audience, which is most of you. Be careful getting on the power in your acceleration zones out of low speed corners. Even if you're running full traction control, it's not going to help you very much below about 100 clicks. Second spin? Really? This is very unlike me today. Tell you what, new tires, no fuel. Tell you what's going on. I have a lot of confidence in this car because I know it very well, but I'm having to talk to you all the time, so most of my running in this has been being able to focus 100%. I'm not quite able to focus 100% right now. My mental resources are divided in two places. I'm trying to say things that are intelligible, and I'm also trying to drive this car quickly. Both will suffer to varying degrees depending on how fast you're trying to drive. Up here, got less fuel on board, obviously. We've burned some off. We've burned through 20 liters of fuel already. Up now. Need a bit more heat. You'll just notice as you go through the heat cycle on the tires, particularly at the beginning, you'll have more cornering grip once they come up to temperature. The brakes will grab a little bit better as well because obviously the tires are also crucial in getting the car stopped. It's not all the brakes. The brakes can generate all the clamping force they want. Tires have to be generating traction in order to transmit that to the road and get the car slowed down. You also notice under acceleration, the rear end won't skate around as much. We're pretty much there now into this new heat cycle on this new set. And the fuel load ticks inexorably down. understeer still. Traction control soared out most of the wheel spin there, still had to short shift a bit. Sosa up the hill, hard on the power. Third, fourth, fifth. Why? Well, I know exactly why. I missed my mark by about a half an inch. You've got to be precise. You've got to be really precise. Despite all of the aero, despite all of the braking, despite all of the electronic systems that the car has to help you keep it in line, namely the traction control, you have to be inch perfect in this car. I was literally a half an inch too far to the left, and that's enough to turn the car into a surfboard. You've got to be absolutely perfect all the time. This car does not flatter you, nor does it try to teach you anything. It's not like Formula RSS2, which was the last review piece I did. That car is very much a teaching car. It magnifies your mistakes, but it also flatters you a bit when you get things right. This car doesn't care about how good you are or how bad you are. It's simply going to show you results, and it's not gonna judge you at all. It's just gonna say you either did good or you did really, really bad, and it's gonna show you by spitting you off in the direction you don't want to go in the literal blink of an eye. Really going to have to concentrate if we're going to go faster in this thing. There you go. That's hitting my mark. Did you notice any difference? No, I didn't either. Trying to overtake the front a little bit into the first element of the Rivazza corners. Pushes me wide through the second element. 30 liters of fuel. Come on, focus. 118.485. See, I'm getting upset with myself, but I'm still doing 118.4s. That's by no means a slow time around here. Yeah, the ultimate pace is still about 2 seconds quicker. Throw it in, hard turn in, get on the power as quickly as you dare. It's too wide on the exit there. Picked up some grass, compromised me all the way through the corner. Backed out of it before it turned into a massive accident. Focus, focus, focus. You know a lot about this car already. I'm trying to think about more things to tell you about it. I've told you everything there is to tell you about this car over the last 20-something videos I've made featuring it. This is simply the best of the best. Version 1.0, free for all of us. After a year and a half of development, ASR have finally come good on that promise, as they always were with the incremental developments and incremental updates to this car that they released in that closed beta. Got better and better every time. I have to say, the progression in this mod is unique in the sim racing world, though. Because ASR are very open with how they do their work, and they did release those incremental updates, we were able to see firsthand the progress that they were making little by little. With the big AC update that came out last November, the car effectively became undrivable. It bounced all over the place. You could not get the power down at all. For example, through here, Variante Alta, if you hit the curb like that, the car would literally leave the ground, and it would keep oscillating with that vibration for a good 1.5 to 2 seconds before you could get on the power, and the lap times just fell into the abyss. But in the last couple of beta releases, they They solved that problem. They got a hand on the physics. They completely redid the physics from the feel of it from version 0.2 to version 0.5, for example, and it just turned into something truly miraculous, and that's where we are now in 1.0. There we go. This is a much better lap so far. Commentator's curse. Bit of a short shift into third on the power hard. Use the exit curbs all you like. Use the green road. Make the route to the line as short as humanly possible. 1:17.299. That's more like it. A little squirrely there. We're finding the limits. Braking at about 75 meters before the corner, losing a lot of time there. Still up by a quarter of a second. This car really does give you the ability to brake and turn in if you want to. It's got enough aero grip. .117.198, I believe. A little bit too much speed into the second element of Villeneuve, and we paid for it to the tune of 4/10. And we've got a fuel light on. That comes on at 13 liters. We'll have a second fuel light come on the steering wheel at, I believe, 10 liters remaining. That was squirrely. Let's add a splash of fuel, put new tires on it, and let's go for broke. Alright, where do we stand? Best lap time of 1:17.198, I believe it says there. Let's get the tire swapped out, splash of gas. And let's go for it. is all business now. Trying to get the tires through their warm-up. Trying not to lock up, even though you actually got to try pretty hard to lock up. Such is the grip. Just don't lock them up, don't slide too much, don't spin. Traction control is your friend. Conservative through here so we don't spin it. And now we start to wind it up. Over the line. Timing has started. Totally missed the turn in. 100% my fault. I suck. I know. You can let me know how bad I am in the comments. I know. No idea what that was. No idea what that was. You know, we all have days when we're just not quite on the boil, where you feel good and everything seems fine, but then you try to do something like this and you realize that you're just not quite where you should be. I'm having one of those days. Everything's good enough, but it's not quite up to par. My turn in again? Really overthinking that corner. Got one more golden lap on these tires before they cry enough. We've got about 2 laps more of fuel on board. .116.5. So much understeer there. That's infuriating. Tires are really starting to cry enough. I am not at all pleased with myself. And even though I did a 116.5, that was a 16 if my eyes are not mistaken. Yes, that is a 6, not an 8. This is personal now. This is for pride. 116.510. That was the lap time, I can confirm. Be the deflating balloon. Don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about the lap before. You're not happy with your performance for some reason, even though you're actually going pretty fast. For some reason, it just doesn't feel like I'm going fast today. Don't worry about anything. Just drive the car. Over the line. Seventh gear, 18.5 on the revs, and still climbing up to 18.8.5. Third gear, hit the apex, hit the second apex, short into fourth. Hard on the power. Out of Tamburello. Downshift protection caught me out. Well, there goes any chance of going faster on this lap. It's also the first time I've hit downshift protection. All right, this has got to be the one. Three-tenths slower. How is that possible? One more chance, I promise. And there goes any chance I had. One corner, again, you've got to be precise. You've got to be very precise. You cannot make a single error anywhere. Simply cannot make a mistake in this car. But you can see the value of this mod. It sucks you in and it demands 100% of your focus. That is the mark of something truly special. That's what this car is. We've known it for a long time, but finally it is available to the general populace for Assetto Corsa, and it's wonderful. And I almost pulled the Giancarlo Fisichella there. I think I've hit the limits of my talent for the day, and I am upset with myself because I can go faster than this. I can go a bit faster than that. My best lap time is 16.5. Well, that's almost the ultimate pace, but it's not quite the ultimate pace. I wanted to hit the ultimate pace here. But it's not. It's just not. I don't think we've got it. But at any rate, there it is. ASR's Ferrari F2004, available, finally, for all of us, in version 1.0. It's been a long time coming for ASR, but they promised us long ago that they would release this car and all of their other mods in version 1.0 for free, and they have done exactly that here with the F2004. It is, and it has always been, in my opinion, the ultimate open-wheel driving experience in Assetto Corsa. Yes, we have Formula Hybrid now. We have other Formula 1 cars now, the great ones by VRC, for example, the F2007, the MP422. But this one, it's got a V10, and it's painted red, and it has the Kaiser on board, Michael Schumacher. That is what sets this car apart more than anything else. It's got 950, 980 horsepower. It's immensely powerful. It's immensely fast. It has just as much horsepower as the 2017 Formula 1 frontrunners. However, it does not have the extra 100 or so kilograms of weight. Therefore, the cornering speeds are higher. The acceleration is faster, the braking is more efficient, and the overall smaller dimensions of this generation of car mean that in general it's just a bit more light on its feet, it is more nimble, it's more agile. It all in all is a better driving experience even than that of the very latest generation. Do check out the Ferrari F2004 by ASR. However, I will have a link in the description over to the Race Department download page as well as to the ASR website, where if you appreciate the work that these guys do, and they really do have some great projects going on, and the level of workmanship, as you have seen here, is absolutely avant-garde, do consider supporting these guys by giving them a small donation, the amount of your choosing, simply because they do all of this in their spare time. All of these modders have day jobs as well. They work long into the night, I'm led to believe, producing great content like this. And in version 1.0 here, they give it to us for nothing. It's absolutely wonderful. It's a great gesture of support by these modding teams, including by ASR, of course, to the sim racing community in general. That everybody just does this ultimately because we think it's a blast. We do it simply to have fun and to enjoy motorsports from a slightly different perspective, the most exclusive perspective of all, the driving perspective. An opportunity that most of us will never have the chance to partake in. Most of us will never drive a racing car, let alone a Formula 1 car. So the fact that we're able to get as close as we can to the fidelity with which we can with something like this, with this ASR Ferrari F2004. Hats off to you guys once again for doing some absolutely incredible work. It's a service to the sim racing community for sure to be able to have something of this quality available to all of us, and of course the historical and sentimental significance now of a car like this, the F2004, Michael Schumacher's last championship winner, surely is not something that is lost to any of us in the motorsports fan community. I do thank all of you for sticking with me through this review piece. I know it has been a bit long, and I know that in the middle there on track I was pretty quiet because just having to grapple a little bit more than I anticipated with this car. I know this car very well, but today I just did not quite feel on the boil, so even though I got within a couple of tenths of my ultimate lap record in this thing, it just didn't feel quite right, and I was more so trying to figure out what was going on. But I hope it was enjoyable anyway, just to get the sense of what this car really does to you. It makes you really dig deep and focus and find out really what you're made of. The car will be there for you and all that, but you have to be brave enough and skillful enough to approach the car's limits. Have a lot of fun with this thing, guys. I know you will. Please, however, stay tuned because we have hot laps forthcoming without commentary, of course. You'll see them from external as well as onboard replay shots here at Imola. Until next time, however, thank you all very, very much for sticking with me through this. Thank you very much for your continued support and engagement on the channel. I really do appreciate it very, very much. Stay tuned for the hot laps, everyone. However, until next time, Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you very much, and we will see you soon.